I'm Zaccura and welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be talking about hands, and drawing hands too. But before we get into that, I just wanted to explain a quick little thingy. So I've been meaning to make quote-unquote tutorials on certain things like anatomy and hands and poses and whatever for some time now. However, I've always kind of chickened out of making them because I am not a master at proportions or those things. It's something that I still practice a lot myself and I still need a lot of practice on. And I just don't want to be teaching information in that way because I don't want people to be picking up on any bad habits that I have, of which I am sure I have many. But at the same time, I've had people ask me on multiple occasions for tips or tutorials on certain things, and I do want to help if I can. And I have learned some stuff over my art journey so far, so I've kind of devised this way to share this info with you guys. And so I'm kind of starting a new series. I don't know what we'll call it. You guys are gonna have to help me. I don't know what to call it. But basically, what I'm going to be doing is just doing my own practice and study sessions, like the kind of stuff I would normally do off camera for my own practicing purposes, except I'm going to be recording it and then narrating what I did, how I did it, and what I learned from it. And so in that way, you guys can have some insight into how I break things down and how I practice, and we can sort of learn together. Because I'm not your teacher, I'm your buddy. Come and hang and draw with me. So this was definitely not the first hand study session I've ever done, but it was the first digital one. I usually do study sessions in my sketchbook, and the reason is because when you're forced to erase everything and redraw them, there's no resize tool, there's no zoom in or whatever on sketchbooks, that you're kind of really forced to understand what you're drawing and you can't really take any shortcuts. But I thought, let me give it a try digitally to see how it goes. But I still did limit myself. I made sure not to use the lasso tool to resize anything. And so if I ever made a mistake, I just erased and redrew. But I did use the handy, pun intended, flip the canvas tool multiple times to see the mirror image of what I was drawing, because that just pops all the mistakes in your face. That's like a tip for you if you've never tried using flipping the canvas. Flipping the canvas will help you see your mistakes instantly, so you can do that for any kind of drawing you're doing. So the first three hands that I drew at the beginning, which are all kind of up together on the top left of the canvas, were all done without using any reference. They were just random hands drawn from my head, and then the rest of the hands that I drew were all done using my left hand as reference in real life. No photograph, just holding up my left hand in that position and then trying to draw it. And I did that because I was kind of curious to see the difference between the way I draw hands when I use reference versus the way I draw hands when I don't use reference. And I could see a notable difference actually in the way, and I think it's kind of part of style, I suppose. Like the way I drew hands without using a hand as reference, the lines were kind of more, I don't know, sharper, I suppose. And of course also the proportions weren't as good, but I'll be talking a bit more about that in a little bit later. So when it comes to doing studies of real life things, I found that there are sort of two ways of going about it. The first way is to build up your subject by first laying down the basic shapes and then slowly building up detail on top. And the second way, which I feel is the way that most newer artists, including myself, this is what I did too, they tend to do, is to just kind of jump right into just drawing exactly what you see. And while doing both forms of studying I found has its benefits, I found that the first way is much more important and useful. Because if you learn how to break things down into basic shapes and then build the detail on top, it really allows you to just really draw anything. Whereas the second way is much more difficult and usually results in wonky proportions or flattened drawings, meaning it actually ends up looking less 3D because you were so caught up in the details that you forgot the basic form of what you were trying to draw. However, I wouldn't say never to do studies in that way because I found that it does actually help train your eyes to see things in detail. But when it comes to trying to learn how to draw an object, a thing, so that you can have that thing in any setting or position and still be able to draw it, then finding the basic shapes and building detail on top is like king. So the shapes that I like to use for helping me to draw hands are this trapezoidy shape thing for the base palm, this triangle wedge thing for the thumb base, and cylinders for each segment of each finger. I found that no matter how you shape your hand, these basic shapes are always present. However, I like to think of them pretty loosely because our hands are, fleshy. So these shapes can twist and morph slightly depending on the position that it's in. So really all I'm trying to do when I look at a hand is to find where are these basic loose forms, but then I don't rigidly draw okay, I must draw this exact trapezoid shape because that's how I memorized it. No, that would be drawing what you think and not what you see. I still draw whatever shapes are right there in front of me. It's just that by remembering the basic trapezoid shape and cylinders, I know roughly what to look for, and that helps me identify and break down the object that's in front of me right now. And that will also help you for when you need to draw hands or whatever from memory. You can just start with those basic shapes and then build up from there. But even after you know these basic shapes and you kind of get the hang of it, it's still really important, I found, to still do studies of your actual hand because, like I said, the shapes do morph and twist and whatever depending on the position of the hand, and you may not always get them right when you draw them from memory. For example, right here you can see me drawing another thumbs up pose, and this one was actually drawn using my left hand as reference. I put my hand in the thumbs up position, and right away I noticed a mistake that I made with the first thumbs up, and that was the thumb was hyperextended. It's really up there, and not necessarily to the realm of impossibility, but normally people don't give thumbs ups like that, and it does make it look kind of unnatural. You could pass it off saying, oh, it looks cartoony or whatever, but really it's just that it doesn't seem very natural. So even though I used, those basic shapes that I remembered, I wasn't necessarily able to remember exactly how they relate to each other, and just the overall gesture and things that we do with our hands. And the more you do studies of your hand and get acquainted with how your hand moves, the more you'll retain that information and remember it for when you need to draw it without reference. Also, you guys may have been noticing that even though I mentioned that I have one cylinder for each segment of each finger, when I was actually drawing these things on that you can see, I actually don't really use the exact cylinders. I'm not drawing cylinders everywhere and stuff like that. Really, I'm really the only basic shape that I'm kind of sticking to is the trapezoid shape, but even then it's really loose in there, and that's just because I've been drawing hands. I've drawn hands a lot. Well, not a lot, but I've drawn hands more, and so the more I've drawn hands, I've noticed the less that I tend to actually stick to really drawing every single cylinder, because I've already kind of I can already visualize it, and I can just kind of jump right into just drawing the segments of the finger without actually having to draw the 3D cylinders and then erasing the guidelines underneath. But when I was first starting, the cylinders were everything. They helped me a lot to be able to get the fingers and so forth in the right positions. So yeah, I'd say that's natural. Just the more you do something, the less time and the less guidelines I guess you have to use. But that's not the same as just never learning the guidelines and never using them. So yeah. And also, these are just the guidelines that I've found and that I use because it's easier for my head to understand. But I've seen that a lot of artists, they kind of have all their own ways of breaking things down. And I would implore you to try and see what works best for you. I mean, even though I have like this system of these three different shapes, I sometimes also use other techniques that I've picked up from other artists. For example, when I'm drawing a hand, and if I notice like all the fingers align in this kind of arch, I'll just like quickly sketch in that arch, and that will be like a guideline to help me understand how long each finger should be. That's something I picked up from watching, other artists, and I've seen them do that. But I do this all the time? No, I do this sometimes. So I just say, use whatever guidelines will help you draw the picture you want to draw right at that moment, and don't feel like you need to be rigidly sticking to one way of doing it. Just like learn all the guidelines, but then only use whatever is useful at the time when you need it. So when I do studies in my sketchbook, I usually keep drawing until I fill up the whole page, but since this was digital, and as you could see throughout the video, I was like resizing and moving the hands around to make room, I wasn't really sure when to stop, so I just decided to go for 1 hour, and interestingly, I managed to sketch exactly 10 hands in 1 hour. It's like 10 hands per hour is my current speed, I suppose. And then just decided to go into the line work. And that's another thing. When I did my first hand study session a while back in my sketchbook, it took me much, much longer to draw each hand. To fill up one sketchbook page, I'm pretty sure it took me like 2 days overall. But the more practice, not only the better you get, but also the faster you get, which is why doing these sessions are so helpful for fast improvement. So the reason why I'm doing line work, even though this is not for illustration, it's just for studying, so technically after doing the sketches, like there's no point in doing the line work. But the reason why I'm doing the line work is so that I can force myself to commit to one line. This is something that I do when I do the study sessions in my sketchbook. I just don't actually like take out my dip pen or anything like that, because that would be kind of a waste of ink. But I always try to refine the sketch and just kind of refine it to the point where it's really just one line. It's not like super sketchy. And the reason I do that is because when you struggle to draw something, you tend to draw a lot more lines. Things end up looking a lot darker, and you're just kind of going over the same stuff over and over and over again until you have like 10,000 lines in one area. And the problem with that is because you have so many lines, one of them is right. And so when you look at it at a glance, it's like, oh yeah, that looks good. That looks like a good sketch. Things are properly proportioned, whatnot. But you don't actually know which line is the one that's making it look right. So when you have to narrow it down to one line, it kind of forces you to, just to know which line is the one that's making it look right. In particular, right here, this hand was definitely the hardest one for me to draw. It was the one that had the most depth, it has the most foreshortening. It was a study of my left hand resting on top of my laptop screen. And you could see from the sketch was like a lot darker than the other sketches. The lines were a lot thicker because I just had to keep going over the things over and over again because it wasn't looking right. But then when it came to the line work, I just have to commit to one line. And I think I found that to be important because that way you can really see your mistakes and understand how to draw it properly. So here are the finished studies next to pictures of my hand, but the pictures are sort of off because I took them after the whole drawing session was over, so I couldn't quite get my hand in the exact same positions again. Not to mention the wide lens on my camera distorts the images slightly, but I figured it'd be nice to have some context next to the drawings. And as you can see, the drawings are far from perfect. I think the main points I need to work on are foreshortening because, like I said, that one with my hand on top of my computer screen was the most difficult, so I need to work on drawing hands in perspective more. And also, I seem to have some issues with keeping the fingers the right size always. Often one of them, in particular the middle finger, is too long or too wide, so I need to work on focusing on that more because I think that may be attributed to me drawing what I think rather than what I see, because, you know, we all know the middle finger is supposed to be the biggest. So I think I may have been overdoing that because of that. When it comes to drawing hands from memory, I need to keep in mind the flow of hands and being careful not to make hand positions that are unnatural, unless of course I'm doing something, you know, cartoony, and that's the purpose. Overall, this was a nice drawing session, and also I found that actually doing these studies digitally ended up being quite nice, so long as you don't take shortcuts such as using tools to manipulate certain parts of your drawings, or, you know, using the undo button constantly. The ability to move your drawings away to make more space, and the easy click of a button to flip your canvas around to catch your mistakes rather than having to, you know, hold up your paper to a window or using a light box, makes the whole process that much more faster and intuitive, and that way you can really just focus on doing your studies. So I would give digital studying a big thumbs up. Ha 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 ha, puns. But I would still say to do studies on paper as well, because just the overall feel is different, and I don't really know how to explain it, and I think it's always good to be able to draw confidently with a pencil and paper, even if you do choose to be a mostly digital artist. So, now your buddy Zaccura is going to give you guys some homework, but you don't actually have to do it. It's totally fine if you don't. See, that's the benefit of a buddy rather than a teacher. I don't care if you guys don't do your homework. But anyway, the task is to do a hand drawing session like I did for this video. First, draw one or more hands from memory without using any reference. Then, using your non-dominant hand as reference, try sketching different positions for about an hour. You don't actually have to stick to the time limit. You can go for less or more, whatever works better for you. And definitely don't rush to try and get as many hands as possible within that time. The time is just there so you can get an idea for how long it takes you to draw. Within these random hand positions, try to do at least one that is the same position as one of the hands you drew from memory, such as what I did with the thumbs up, and one holding or interacting with an object, such as I did with the phone. You can do this study either digital or traditional, whichever you feel more comfortable with, but if you do go digital, just remember not to use any manipulation tools to fix mistakes, and try not to use the undo button too much either. If you mess up, just erase and try again. And once you're finished, share it and tag me, or just let me know. Honestly, you don't have to, but honestly, I'm just curious to see if anyone's actually gonna do this. You can find me on pretty much every social platform: Twitter, Instagram, Newgrounds, DeviantArt, Artamino, Facebook, whatever. It's all linked in the description box. But if you can, I'd recommend sharing it on Twitter, because I will probably retweet it. And that brings me to the end of episode 1 of Study with Your Buddy Zaccy. I don't know. I need your guys' help to come up with a name for this series. Give me some suggestions in the comments section. I tried asking Toto for help, but he's still upset at me for not putting him in my last few videos. Yeah. I really hope you guys found this video interesting or helpful in any way, and if you did enjoy it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe and hit the little bell so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. I make new videos every week, usually uploading on Sundays. Thanks so much for watching. I wish you guys the best of luck with drawing your hands, and until next time, stay awesome, stay inspired, always. See ya!